Well, welcome everybody to episode 3 of Community Cloudcast vNext. I'm joined this month by the actual host of the show, Paul McCollum. I suppose, am I the guest? Am I the co-host this month? What are we doing?
I think you're the moderator, and so am I.
Uh, all right, co-moderators. Well, welcome everybody. As you probably know, if you're watching this webcast by now or not, if you're just picking up on this, vNext is where we talk about technologies relating to things new or happening in the future or upcoming, not necessarily around any particular stack or cloud or area. And in point of fact, this month we're going to talk all up about the future of artificial intelligence in the enterprise and AI, I suppose, as a whole. So, Paul, why don't we start off with some thoughts from you? I know you recently had a Salesforce user group meeting with a similar topic to this not too long ago. What came out of that, and what are your thoughts around it from that stack?
Well, I'll tell you, I had a chance to summarize, and I'll get your opinion and see if you agree with this or not. Um, I was we had a great session, but I can't help but thinking about buzzword bingo and marking my squares on buzzword bingo with AI, and I was joking, but not the blockchain and quantum computing and AI are out there, and the applications for those, I think AI is kind of speeding up, and to me, AI has the shortest path to get to realized value over quantum computing and any of the other hot new technologies that are kind of bleeding edge out there as far as our v.next topics. So it's interesting to see where things are kind of peeking through, but the potential is still really wide open for what it can do. I think we're not quite ready to dream big enough to use it. So the applications for it are still how wide we pull that window open to be able to use it is it's going to take us a while to adapt to the new capability. We're just not used to thinking in those terms of, all right, go get the entirety of the internet and do a sentiment analysis on this and come back and help me figure out next best action on my case. Really hard to think in those terms when you're used to thinking and programming and kind of step by step when there is stuff to do. So I think it'll get there. I think the capability's there to be able to take advantage of it.
Well, let's maybe start with a little bit of demystification here, because what we call artificial intelligence isn't really intelligence at all, and it's not actually that artificial. Where we stand today is you have a large pool of compute resources that are backed by data in the form of models that provide a basis from which a set of algorithms can respond to certain prompts or inputs. At the same time, you have free-form search and sentiment analysis, which takes content, not necessarily related content, but often categorized content, and turns it into a set of data blocks or data elements that from which can be extracted certain responses. So if you begin by engaging with a chatbot, for example, on a particular topic, it's going to look for keywords out of the input that you give it. It's going to check its sentiment database for those. It's going to then take categorized content and respond. And the models that we have today, which are not self-aware, are simply based on the input that they've been given and that from which they can extract via hyperscale search. So AI as it stands, and as cool as things like ChatGPT and whatnot are, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit, it's garbage in, garbage out. They're only as good as the models that they've been provided. They show inherent bias based on that modeling and the data that they've been fed and the data sources that they are pointed at. And we've already seen, a lot of very exploitative use of those models, trying to fool it and trick it into revealing bias, which it obviously does because it's not self-aware. So we have this. Where we stand now is maybe we're not in the raw infancy, but we're pretty close to it, where we're just on the beginning cusp of taking this sort of technology forward. There are obviously dangers and concerns with that as this improves and gets better. But I tend to agree with your sentiment that we're looking through a very narrow vision at the moment of what we think AI is and can do. And the broader picture of what can happen with that has yet to be revealed to us. And your examples, I think, are also apropos, because blockchain is very much the same. It started with a small, in the terms of, the overall computing and technology space, it started with a very small remit. And then it gained a lot of traction in terms of discussion share and the overall awareness of it, and it was the hot thing at the moment. And then we've determined that there's a lot of boundaries and rails on that, and are finding good uses for where to put that technology, again, also sort of in its toddler stage. So yeah, I think that's appropriate. We're just beginning to see where this can go, and yet already we've seen some pretty amazing things with what we have just today.
Yeah, no, and I'm upset that you did the break it down before I did, because I kind of jumped into the that's usually my game. Artificial, from a computer science perspective, artificial intelligence has an entirely different meaning when you're trying to create thinking algorithms that can process information and do things with it. And that we've skipped forward to a very narrow slice of that with generative AI. Which is natural language search results. If you have any, to stretch it very heavily, in classical compute, I like to liken it to the Chinese room analogy. If you've read those, that's when you're comparing strong AI and things that are trying to pretend to be AI. One of the analogies that they use is, if you put a Chinese room, somebody who doesn't speak Chinese, a language that is fairly alien to the speaker, and you put them in a room and you pass them notes in Chinese, and they have a library, theoretically, they have a library of Chinese conversations, languages in this, or conversations in this language, and they can go look up and see where these terms have come in and see what an appropriate response is, and they spit that back out of the door, that the same thing. And it's not artificial intelligence, it's not responding, it's pattern matching and trying to do it based on a library of known good responses, not actually doing any processing. It's just input, and I have a large library of outputs to map from. And that's what the Chinese room analogy is. And it's a type of maybe could pass a Turing test and fool a human into thinking it was another human, but not actually doing any intrinsic reasoning or logic. I think generative AI is what the chat GPT that everybody's excited right now is much more akin to that. And it falls into the same traps that we had. I remember trying to hit people with the filter bubble, when your search results, and we had this like a generation ago, the bias that comes in whenever Google and Bing and Fast and all the search results were coming in, and they were trying to figure out what answer you want, not what answer was necessarily the truth, because the computers don't know the truth, but they know other people who were searching for this in your area, in your time zone, with your browser demographics. They stopped searching when they found this answer, so that must be the one that you want. Therefore, everybody that searches for this in your area gets one answer. Everybody who searches for it in another area gets a different answer. Same search engine, but you stay within that bubble of it's trying to respond to you based on who you are. And that that's the bias. That's the same kind of thing that ChatGPT will give you. All the generative AIs are trying to find the answer that you want and not necessarily able to discern what's right and what's wrong and what's fair and what's not. So that will be an interesting hurdle to come across, but it's the same one we've hit, like I said, generations back.
Well, and there's no question that where we stand today, those sorts of models are easily manipulated, if not by the programmers themselves, certainly by understanding of the algorithm. The more times you smash the truth button on something, the more it heightens in the algorithm, regardless of whether it's true or not, right? So you're influencing that result with positive bias towards it. And as you say, because the machine has no way to differentiate between what's true and false, in many ways it's similar to the Google enterprise search problem, right? Google searches or web search is a popularity contest. Enterprise search is a metadata contest, and they're two entirely different things. Rob Bogan and I talked about this a couple episodes ago in our Winging It episode, where the never the twain shall meet, nor should they meet. Because they're two entirely different things. And I think we're, especially in this context of speaking about the enterprise, we're in very much a similar vein where this chatbot fervor that we have going on right now is completely disconnected to what enterprises need artificial intelligence for. When I think of AI in the enterprise, I think of intelligent process automation, where a algorithm can analyze a particular process and find better ways to achieve that process. Well, one of the greatest books I ever read was called Critical Chain, and it's over on my bookshelf, but I forget the author's name, and he had a follow-up book to it as well. That was all about mapping through a process to get to desired outcomes. And when you have competing outcomes or competing views on that, how do you reconcile though into the most streamlined process? And he came to it from a manufacturing point of view, but it's very much about how do you apply a large amount of variables and potential outcomes that the human brain can't process very quickly into an answer that you can get very fast, and thus you feed it a problem and it returns a solution. There are a number of other areas inside the enterprise where a conceptual AI has I think a great deal of potential value, right? In eliminating a lot of the issues that we have inside an organization that are cultural, for example, right? If the machine doesn't know anything about culture, it's looking for the most efficient way to approach a particular problem or to get an outcome once again. And so you can cut through a lot of that stuff potentially. And those are bigger picture things, but from practical applications, there's lots of other things it can do within the enterprise, not the least of which could be, for once and finally, automatically categorizing the amount of knowledge that is locked away inside of electronic media inside an organization that we've never found a good way or a method to get at that and unlock it and make it actually usable and functional to us. So yeah, very much like that search algorithm of the past and that problem that we've had, I think there are great potential here, none of which has anything to do with giving some chatbot a prompt and getting a Chinese room response.
Do you see the power of AI in the enterprise being something more of being able to crunch large pieces of data and pull summaries out, being able to automate processes? What is your version of the usable story of AI that you see in the path?
Well, those are certainly two of them. I'm, as you know, I spend a lot of time in process automation, primarily what we do, and I can envision the scenario where we can feed a AI-driven algorithm of inputs and variables and have it describe for us a process and create that process, implement that process for us, identify weaknesses, say in a production chain or in a revenue generation model, or some things, especially very complex issues where there are thousands of steps and permutations in a process. If you think about taking things from scientific R&D to actually getting a product to market, for example, right? There's a lot of things that happen inside of that process. How can AI look into that process and streamline and make it more effective? I think that also crunching a lot of data, certainly, but more importantly, finding patterns in that data and revealing patterns to us that aren't necessarily apparent. Think, for example, at the moment, if you want to dashboard critical indicators for your business, right? It takes a whole team of Power BI people and data scientists and everybody. First, you just have to have a data model, right? And you have to get that data model together. Then you have to ingest the data. Then you have to define what those metrics are and how they're measured and how they're displayed, and what's the best way to interpret those, et cetera, et cetera. It's a lot of work. Can an AI model look at a massive amount of collected data, bring all that together, define that data domain, and make everything happen very quickly and surface those inputs? Can it also take inputs outside of the organization? Can a model go out and search and say, we think that the most important metric to measure our business by is cost of customer acquisition, whereas perhaps the analysts or the customers themselves have an entirely different method of measuring, what's actually important from your business. You and I have seen it all the time, where businesses are focused completely in the wrong area from what their customers actually care about, right? So in those areas, plus knowledge management of bringing together all this unstructured data and actually making sense of it and helping us to find things, similar to what Microsoft is doing, something very interesting with its Copilot in Office 365 of real-time content creation and helping to look for other content that's out there and say, hey, Paul just created a document about such and such that has these things in it, and bringing it up as referential to what you're typing or working on, or helping you craft an email. Those things, I think, are very beneficial in the enterprise, and really where artificial intelligence, sort of the promise of it, meets the rubber of the road of how it gets implemented in the enterprise. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, it's an interesting use case. If there's a lot of documents out there with a variety of knowledge, having something pull together the threads from multiple documents into a single view. Hey, I want to know about this, which is a slice of a horizontal of 30 different people's documents, and being able to assemble that together. I can see that having a lot of value. But is at that point, isn't that just more effective Googling? More effective searching and bringing that together. And then the other examples you're making, and I'm now thinking back to the academic definition of artificial intelligence versus whether it's data crunching or not, whether we've got, are we smart enough yet? Are our AI technologies to the point that they can be left to their own devices and bring stuff back to us without us having to put in, go crunch this calculation, go parse a lot of this data and bring it back to me. And we saw this, one of those fun examples at a place where I worked previously. They were trying to figure out if there was a correlation between how many food products were sold versus the cleanliness of the area that the food products were showcased in. And they looked at the data, and looking at the data, they found the opposite, that where food was selling more in the dirty cases. So the idea became, looking at that, oh, well, we need to make all the cases dirty so food will sell more. And the aha moment happened after they told that to a couple of people and started sending those directions. Like, no, the more traffic a case has, the dirtier it gets. You were looking for a cause and effect relationship. You found an effect and a cause and effect, and then you interpreted them backwards. And it took a while to get that done. And I don't know that we have computers smart enough, that we have algorithms smart enough to actually interpret the data without a data scientist back there making those kind of and really forcing the hand. So I feel like the current AI is doing pieces of it, but it's a little bit of a misnomer on the artificial intelligence side. Sorry, you got me thinking down that academic path.
No, I agree with you 100%. I think that the again, it's garbage in, garbage out. The AI models are only good as the models themselves, or I should say, the AI results are as only good as the models. And without intrinsic understanding of what it is we're looking for, what it is we're trying to achieve, those produce nothing, nothing useful. They may produce a lot, but it's nothing useful. And where I think the next step in the evolution of it needs to be, where we need to be focusing on, is how do we produce better models, and how do we then enable algorithms that take those models and create new models automatically, right? Can
Yeah.
you extrapolate from these three models and create a fourth one based on inputs that have been given, right? And some of that is already happening today, but that's the next piece where we need to get to, where they become predictive in what they're doing. We're always going to have rails around the stuff. It's one of the scenes from The Matrix. I always think about every time we start talking about AI, and that's where the Elder of Zion is standing with Neo on the balcony, and they're talking about the machines, and Neo says, "Well, we could just turn these off." And he says, "Well, yes, of course we could, but then we wouldn't have any water, and we wouldn't have any clean air, right?" So there's a balance there, and I think there always will be a balance where we have helper technologies for the human element that go only so far. And I think it's absolutely right for people in the industry, and we'll just call out Elon and others because this has recently come to light, who have stepped forward to say, hang on, we need to put some boundaries on this. This can't just be unfettered growth of this, because they're looking forward and they're seeing we could expand this beyond the helper arena, right, and get into where machines truly take control. Because we all know, once the machines take control, the first thing they're going to realize is that humans are the problem, right, and eliminate the humans. There's no question about that.
Yeah, we've seen more games. Yeah, no, Terminator.
We all know where that's going. So, but to your more practical point, I think, yeah, we're not there yet in terms of, are we even beyond the ability for the algorithms to step beyond the shackles that they've been given? And I don't think we are there yet. The computing power isn't there, to your point. We're getting there with cloud and massive distributed computing. We'll need quantum computing before we ever approach that barrier. And we also need a better understanding of when we say data science, it's almost more data art, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's boiling it down into science, because we can make patterns and suppositions when we look at data that are hard to write down and quantify and put into a model, right? And so I think it's less data, a mixture of data science and art. When we get to true science around that, then I think we'll be able to guide those models better. So yeah, I'm in lockstep with you on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that it'll be interesting. Now, on that side, on the hot topic of the day, Chat GPT and the other GPT variants that are coming out are doing some very exciting things. I do very much look forward to being able to use natural language shaping and for conversations. And I can't tell you how many times that I've uttered a keyword to somebody in tech support that they didn't clue into because they missed it, or it's not part of their regular script, that I wish there was something listening in and making some other suggestions as they heard, the PED has been run over, or, this IP, my MAC address looks like it's in conflict and that I don't have a problem paying my bill. I wish there was something else adding value to that. And I think there'll be a lot of interesting places that we can do that to bring those suggestions, as opposed to, keyword flags and red lights blinking, that we can actually say, have you asked the customer if this is their problem?
Mm-hmm.
I'm typing the same email over and over again. It's going to take 45 minutes, but it follows the same pattern of explanation that I'm trying to get, that I've given 14 other times, or has gone through the system, and maybe suggest some of that and take the weight off of it. Not truly the traditional AI, yet another term that's been kind of bastardized, just like the cloud to me used to mean grid computing. And that's not really what that turned into. That turned just into remote hosting. So yeah, just important to separate those initial connotations from the actual application that was going on right now as you're as we're becoming conversant in a slight variant of the original.
Yeah, but let's
content.
not dissipate or diminish what's happening at the moment, because there's a tremendous amount of value there. Let's take, for example, sitting in the marketer's chair, because I have to wear this hat for Aptogen all the time. I'm a developer, right? I sling code. That's what I like doing, envisioning solutions to problems and enacting those problems. I'm not a marketer. I don't think like a marketer. I can't analyze a set of text effectively and turn it into good marketing terms, because I don't have that knowledge. But I can feed that text to a chatbot that has models for that, and it can spit back to me a better version of what I was trying to create. Right? That's a
Mhm.
good thing. It's doing less with more, right? Or
Mhm.
doing more with less. Um, I can ask it to, based on a piece of content that I've created, to summarize it, to make it better, to suggest alternatives. I can, when I start down to write an article, I can ask it to give me content related to that, and then it's very effective at doing what we as humans naturally do. When we do a search for stuff, we scan it, we synthesize, right? We look at it, we pick things out based on all of the processing that's happening in the back of our head. But it takes time for us to do that, whereas the algorithm can do it for us very quickly. It's the same activity essentially that's happening, so it can go out and find things for me and suggest content that I can write that myself, but it gives me very quick suggestions and just makes it happen faster. There's a tremendous amount of value in that, right? Getting those messages out, being able to respond quicker, to create a marketing campaign and then immediately start responding to customer feedback on social media, for example. You'd have to have an army of people monitoring every social feed and updating your ads and your content. Well, an AI bot, and AI, we'll put that in air quotes for now, but that
Mhm.
bot can go and do that for you very quickly. It can analyze those responses. Ooh, we're getting a lot of negative sentiment to this tweet we put out. What are they responding to? Oh, it's this wording that we used, right? Change that, right? Change the
Mhm.
wording, try it again. Instant A/B testing, right? From that scenario. There's a lot of value in that. Okay, there's negatives, right? Copywriters who are out of work or whatnot. But I don't. We always say this: it's going to put people out of work. It's going to put people out of work. We said that about the cloud. We said that about everything, and it hasn't happened because there's still a human element that's necessary in all of this. And you can tell. I know it's getting better, but right now you can still tell when you're talking to a chatbot.
Oh yeah, no, quickly. I have fun with that, and I love chiming in whenever I think I'm getting chat botted, asking if they know my friend Eliza and making references to old old NLP programs and stuff, and see if they catch that, or if the chatbot programmers know whenever they've been uh, outfoxed. And I usually get it in one or two lines. Um, but those are fun. The fact that we're still figuring those out quickly tells you where we're at a little bit too. Um, And I wanted to so the power is there, but we do have some of the first um, slippages that are happening right now. And your friend Mr. Musk has two that are kind of coming up under have been in the news lately with the training data source of Twitter. There was some. Um, I think it was Microsoft, and I'll hope better air quote, or we may have to bleep me out if I'm getting in trouble when I'm misremembering the headline that Twitter was firing back that it was being used as a data source to train AI programs. And so that public data, that data that's out there that we're all allowed to use, not necessarily as a database for applications that we're building and training and things like that. And then the full self drive has been coming under fire because it turns out it's harder to be a thinking machine than everybody hoped it would be.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to be able to send my car out to get Whataburger anytime soon. I've still got to drive there if I want it, or ask a person to bring it to me. So those things were kind of having to accept some of those initial failures and rein back in our expectations and put it into use where it can work, has the potential, but we've got to baby step it a little more.
Yeah, I think those are important failures. I think in they reveal two very important things. First off, the Twitter example, right? Twitter is a cesspit of people hiding behind their keyboards, right? And all the worst traits of humanity come out when in this anonymous sphere where people can just spew crap with no consequences, really, for those actions, and we see that happening. And in many cases, people are trying to game it, right, and pretending to be who they aren't. And I think that's a admission, a blanket admission, and fair play to them for saying that our content is mostly full of a lot of junk, and in many cases, really bad junk. Right, the stories are legion of the bots that they turned on that quickly become just these racist, hateful spewing machines. But that's because that's the data that they're finding, and what these algorithms tend to do when they find one thing is get into that bubble you talked about, right? Where they just continue to regurgitate the same stuff. And that's the things that human beings intrinsically, so a lot of times people say things they don't even really believe just to get an effect or a rise or just make a sensation, right? But the computers don't know that because they have no way to weight that. And so you get a lot of junk. But I think it's important to do that and recognize that and expose that and say, here are the limitations and this needs to get better. I think it's also important to expose how those are being gamed and manipulated, right? There was a conversation on Facebook the other day about how Twitter is just garbage and why do I even bother doing this? And to which I responded, yes, it is. And it always has been. Nothing new about that. The difference is we only thought we were being manipulated before. Now we know for sure we were being manipulated. And just think how much easier it is for machines to do that manipulation than it is for people. All these things need to come out. They need to be talked about. We need to have these ugly early failures. The self-driving cars, they need to crash. Before we can get that right. Hopefully in a controlled environment. Hopefully there are no lives endangered, right? It's important to fail early and often in these to help us get those right. And I think that's really important. Electric vehicles are no different, really. We're having a lot of very early failures. A lot of people are jumping in to make this stuff fail very rapidly. And that, I think, is a good thing.
Yeah, it's agile.
In that we're trying to displace centuries, really, of a very particular type of mechanical process that's in use by everybody, and we're trying to replace that. And it's not easy, and it's not going to happen overnight. It in fact is silly for us to be sitting around today talking about how we're going to legislate these things into being when we haven't even done the technology. That's humans being stupid again and trying to capitalize or make political hay out of it or whatever. But take all that away, and it's important that we fail at this stuff as quickly as possible so that we can learn it. I think one of the differences when it comes to AI is that we have 100 years of science fiction where very smart people have looked ahead and given us their vision of how this could go. This is not new that we haven't thought about it. We just haven't been able to do it, right? But plenty of people have thought about it and talked about it. And there needs to be some cautionary tale there, right? It's become blasé to laugh at Skynet is now aware. But at some point, that's going to happen. Right? If we don't put guards and rails around, if we're not selective of where and how we deploy this technology, we are going to end up destroying ourselves. And we need to take that into account as we move these processes forward, not just for society as a whole, but I mean certainly within the corporate sphere. Look, a company with a multi-billion-dollar valuation that employs hundreds of thousands of people could go down the drain in a day if an AI algorithm goes berserk and does the wrong thing, right? There's some definite negative consequences here that need to be thought about. So by all means, let us proceed and fail quickly, but let us proceed intelligently and try and foresee some of these pitfalls.
Yeah, you gotta get the laws of robotics in there early and often and hard coded. Yeah, we've seen that with HAL and lore and all of those good kind of things where they just didn't get that. So hopefully those lessons will be learned at the same time. I'm hoping that we will learn and faster, and we won't have to deal with that. I think it's going to be a long road and hard fought to get it to where we're even close to really hurting ourselves. But we've seen, I mean, the big data thing. What was the? I'll try not get myself sued and talk about the big data one that they'd analyzed shopping patterns and knew that if people were buying this and this, they were probably expecting a baby, and they
Mm.
sent a congratulations notice to a customer, and it
Mm.
was the dad of the 16-year-old girl that was received the notice, and that cat came out of that bag, and there were big lawsuits of how did you say this, and you invaded my daughter's privacy, and all kinds of things by not understanding or processing the fact that, yeah, 99% of the time you're making the right assumption, but you have to work out what all of those 1% means and put a
Mhm.
ton of guardrails around the proper use of that information. We saw that was at the advent of big data, when they finally
Certainly.
got to do that. So
And to
I
a
think we're,
computer, a 99% success rate is about the best it could want,
yeah,
right? But to a human, that 1% is pretty darn important.
yeah. Until that lawsuit hits, that seemed like a lot of profit, and that's where we go. Is if we can shade in everything and get the most profit out of it, what's this risk is somebody else's problem tomorrow.
Well, you
Um,
bring up a really important point here, and that is that the legal system and our entire mechanism for legislating is so woefully behind what's happening in the technology sector that and certainly this is not endemic to AI. We've seen this happen over in email and the FCC not being with the game and just various instances of this happening. But we have to get better at melding the two. And the legal system has to be able to adapt to what's happening in technology. And technology, at some point, as a technologist, it almost pains me to say this, but at some point, technology has to take that into account and slow the pace of innovation to in areas where there are significant legal consequences, and needs to take that into account. Right? There's theoretical innovation and practical innovation, right? And there's always room for theoretical innovation in a lab environment. But before we bring things to bear in a practical perspective, we need to take the legalities into account, and that's a deep morass because it's different all around the world in different countries, right? The different laws apply. How do you implement that? We've got countries now that are banning things like Chat GPT for on solid legal ground for doing so. Sometimes they're maybe making a mountain out of a molehill, but that's argumentative and very gray around all the edges, if not in the center. So there are some real challenges about this. Is not just a technology question. This is
mhm.
how legally are we going to adopt this kind of thing, and when does an AI stop being a computer and start becoming data in Star Trek, right? When does it
Mhm.
become an entity and a being and no longer a machine, right?
Yeah, I
We're
think
going to
we're a
have to answer
way
that question at
to
some point.
worry about ways away from having to worry about that. I think we've got a couple geometric scales of compute, and data processing power before we get to data.
Sure, we do, but we already have a problem with, can a corporation act like a person, right? That's a very difficult legal struggle, and is exploited in both directions constantly, right? Well, we are having seen that problem and not adapting the legal framework fast enough to deal with it. Now we've got technology that moves faster than the speed of light, and a legal framework that's stuck in the dark ages. So we know these problems are coming. These are things we should be thinking about now, right?
Yeah.
And looking forward to how do we architect a legal framework to facilitate all of this. And there's going to be, for every time we say responsible AI development, right? Because humans are still involved in human nature, there's always going to be irresponsible development. It's just the nature of the beast, right? It's going to happen. We need to be able to deal with it.
So this has got me thinking on a tip, and tell me what you think of this. So as these analytical models and algorithms, so it's a little bit of a tangent from where we're at now. Um, as these are developing, And as the data sets to train things become important once they're there, I would say I would advise people to start storing their data. If I'm running a tech support system, I'm going to yell at my dog. Hold on. Sorry, I've got my good mic on. I'm sure you can hear him clearly yelling at the mailman. But I would start saving my data so that I had that non-Twitter, non-poisoned, non-democratic version of a data set to train these models on. If I were investing in the future of AI to be able to make sense of that, I need to stop doing data retention, stop doing management, and start compressing that data and save it because in the future, the road to startup time will be whoever has the best data set to train these new tools and bring them in, because they're going to be fighting over who has the data set. Can I borrow Twitter? And yeah, if you can't do that anymore, I can't troubleshoot. Can I go to Reddit and pull Reddit's data to do troubleshoot tech support for your phone problems? I've been taking phone calls at my company for the past 10 years, and the problems are still the same. I'm just not capturing that data in some place where I can recycle it later. And that would probably be my push for anybody who's possibly able to make use of this at some point, is you're going to need the fuel for that. And if you start storing it now, you might have a better chance at enabling it whenever it's more mature. And I think we're close to that now.
I would add a log to that fire and say, also start documenting your process and the reasoning behind the process, because at some process can be a competitive advantage, and in many cases is a competitive advantage just as much as data is. And understanding not only how something is done, but why it's done. Right? How did Ford, revolutionize the world really with process? Right? He wasn't doing anything different. He was putting cars together, but the process that he used was different, and that's been a great disruptor in business for the past 200 years or further. Right? As we go back, we often talk about it in terms of technological innovations, but many times it's simply process and a better process. He who has the greatest bank of process information, I think, will also become king of that hill, and faster to get there. Save your data, store your knowledge, and identify and document your processes. So many organizations have what we would call intrinsic processes, meaning they just happen. They're not documented. Nobody really thought them through. It's the way it's done. They get tweaked from time to time to do things better here or there. Sometimes people don't even understand them and know why they're doing them, but they all have them. Right? Many of those processes are repetitive and repeatable. HR and legal processes and sales and marketing, many of them are repeatable across industries. Those are the first things that are going to get automated out of the human sphere, right? All of those processes. But many times they also support other processes, right? Once the problem for the organization is when all of those processes and data get abstracted from you, where's your real value? You no longer know how to dig through them and find those gems, and you don't know how to fix. It's like working on your car. You can't work on your car anymore, right? In many cases, it's too complex. It's all in the computer. It's abstracted away from you, right? Troubleshooting code is in many ways the same problem, right? Well, the problem happens to be in that node module that's buried 8,000 lines deep from an npm install, right? You don't even know where to begin in identifying those issues. I think that's not a good thing in terms of being able to take your business going forward. Document them. So at some point you will have an AI algorithm that you can turn onto that data to pull it out when you need it. And also for that data, for that model, that process to have the information it needs in terms of the kind of data sets you're talking about, the unstructured data I'm talking about, and also those processes, right, to take that next evolutionary step in your business. So I agree. Then take it a step further.
Yeah. I think that's the content management stuff has started my gears turning of trying to figure out, we push people to tag documents. And okay, yeah, the search engine, the return on investment of taking the time to tag it and for people to find it, um, is hard to justify. But I think that once we have these more crunching machines in there, um, coaching, getting people to do that, yeah, if you tag your documents, it will let you do this chat GPT level formatting and pulling and owning your knowledge and actually make it impactful, not just slightly faster to find on a search bar.
Well, it's correct. I think what it actually is hard to quantify. Not that it's difficult to justify, it's hard to quantify. Whenever we have that conversation with somebody, I always ask them, okay, you say that metadata is painful and takes too much time and people don't want to do it. Well, let me ask you this. Do you want to be the person responsible when the CEO is on an analyst call and can't find that one bit of information because you didn't want to fill out a field when you uploaded the document? Right?
Yeah.
No, I don't. Well, that's justification. Quantifying that is hard to do. When and where will that happen? It's hard to say. But I agree with you wholeheartedly. We have been trying to no avail for decades now to auto-classify content. And it's too hard for what we have today, the existing models, if you will, to do. There are companies making valiant efforts. Microsoft and its Syntax offering is making a valiant effort to do that. Again, it's model driven, right? It's moving towards this AI driven concept of auto classification, which is the panacea. I think we'll get there. I think very sooner rather than later we'll see a huge quantum leap forward in that area where there are enough models that have been trained. See, all the models now, for the most part, are locked inside of organizations. Those who do have them, and there aren't very many, are locked inside that organization. Once we can take those models and distribute them, anonymize them and distribute them, and give the algorithm access to all of that, that's when things are really going to change. That's when the volcano explodes. And 99% of corporate data is all the same, right? From corporation to corporation, right? It's that, maybe it's not 99%, maybe it's only 90%, but that small bit is what differentiates you, right? But if you can auto classify 90% of your content compared to the 1 or 2% that you're doing now, well, that's a huge win and a massive step forward in collaboration and being able to get and find the stuff, right, that you already have and expose it. So yes, I think that is a near to sort of looking out in terms of, where are these frontiers? I think that one is very close, that we're within a few years of having good auto classification for content and thus better search results and thus better knowledge management.
Yep. Yeah. Big picture, AI will be able to provide, as long as we scale our expectations to not coming up with universal healthcare plans and being able to drive on a busy highway, and we narrow it down to stuff that's actually reasonable for this level of artificial intelligence to do, then yeah, we should have some great success. And as long as we don't get greedy and bloody our noses and ruin our taste for it by letting the Hitlers out of the bag in the models because we were too aggressive and tried to cure too many things at the same time, and ruined our taste for it, then we should be able to see successes. But yeah, I think that'll be important for people to not overstretch, not overreach, and kind of ruin their appetite for being able to use the technology as a whole.
Well, this is the present danger of chasing the next shiny object all the time, right? It is exactly that is going to happen because we put far too much stock in, the latest viral sensation of whatever it is, right? None of us who've been working in this technology for any length of time are surprised, or for that matter, even all that impressed by things like ChatGPT, right? Okay, so it can put it into natural language, but I know what it's doing behind the scenes. I'm not,
Yeah.
is it cool? Yes. Is it helpful? Yes. Is it world shattering? No. But if you listen to the mainstream press, right, it's the, end of the world as we know it.
Mhm.
And back to my reference of countries that are trying to ban it and stuff, you have politicians who have no idea what they're talking about, right? Doing these sorts of things. However, having said that, you bring up an exceptionally valid point. In fact, I think you bring up the point, and that is in our race for the next shiny object and the next thing that AI can do and the next startup and the next billion-dollar idea, and right, the greed. Sometimes monetary greed, sometimes it's greed for fame, sometimes there are very different driving factors. But in our overwhelming avarice, we are going to let those demons run loose. And we need to start talking about it now and how we put guardrails around that and how we collectively interpret, analyze, and respond to those sorts of things, and try not to over sensationalize a lot of these issues. But hot heads prevail at the beginning, right? Cooler heads only prevail at the end. So it's a marathon, but unlike the Tour de France stage, in technology, the sprinters get the recognition at the start of the race, not the end of the race, right?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, there be dragons. There be lots of
Mhm.
dragons here. In the enterprise space, my gut tells me that a lot of that chatter will be ignored, just because enterprises move relatively slow and they can't respond quickly to that sort of thing. There will be a lot of disruptive startups that will, briefly flare and flame out. But I think the enterprise will proceed maybe faster than it has in the past, but will continue to sort of proceed at pace with a much more responsible implementation, as you're describing. But outside of that, could get ugly.
Yeah. The longer we talk about it, the more I'm mad at the name. We've had artificial intelligence has been a sci-fi buzzword for a long time, and we're bringing a technology that is not artificial intelligence to the market and trying to meet those expectations, or people are trying to take it and run with it based on the assumptions they have from early 50s sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
Lane assist versus full self drive is the difference between reality and the label.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to auto drive, and it's not Knight Rider. It is stay within your lane and hit the brakes when you get too close to something. Two totally different things that are being munged together. Artificial intelligence, yeah. Now the more we see, and I think it'll be very up to savvy architects to fight off some of the buzz love wave to try and go out and get in front and be an artificial intelligence software company, when that's kind of the emperor's new clothes a little bit. And yeah, be aware of it. Start making investments in what is actually reasonable, but understand and hopefully tune up your leaders quickly on what it actually means, and make sure that that grain of salt gets invested into, or incepted into your organization, so that you don't run away with it or have any of these large boondoggles around misconceptions of, now we're the cloud, nobody's computer matters, we don't need to buy laptops anymore, everything's. No, that's not what the cloud, that's not especially not what that cloud does, and the people you're talking to aren't doing that. You will really have to distill a lot of this, because this is a really vague, big word that is getting abused pretty badly right now and could lead to some misconceptions. I jumped right in. Oh, we're talking AI. Well, we must be talking generative AI and natural language processing, but that's not what that word means. That's not what that's meant for the past 70 years. But today, that's what people mean when they talk about it, and conversations could be misconstrued and go down a wrong path with very easily.
And now is the time to have those conversations. People may not listen. They didn't listen about the cloud. How many of us told them, no, it's not going to be cheaper. No, it's not magical. Right? It's just somebody else's computer. Right? No, it's not going to solve all your problems. They didn't listen. They threw a lot of money and forged ahead, and now they're paying the price for that. Is it a good thing? Of course it is. Does it offer a lot of advantages? 100%, absolutely. But you can't just run, blindly just throwing money at it, expecting to solve problems. That they are. The adults in the room, as it were, need to speak up now, if for no other reason than to say, "I told you so." But there are lessons to be learned from previous boondoggles, and we should be communicating those as often and as effectively as we can. I think that where can we contribute, right? As technologists, well, we work on continuing to develop these things, which I think are good and cool, and that this whole sphere of technology is very interesting and exciting. But at the same time, I think we also need to be good custodians and get the message out there that let's not get overhyped with this stuff, right? We're in the very early stages, right? And we're not creating hell tomorrow.
Right.
We're getting closer to creating kit, but we're certainly not there yet, right? And with every kit comes a car. So
yeah, exactly. Data
one has to be careful, right? So yeah, I agreed that there is we're in the hype cycle now, right? We're full on in the hype cycle. It has to bleed out at some point, and we have to be a little bit more responsible about that. We're talking about it. Everybody's talking about it. Hopefully the intelligent conversations will continue and the hype doesn't get too far ahead of it. But, it probably will for a while, and then hopefully the pendulum will swing back like it usually does.
Yep. Always does.
Well, and unfortunately, once again, we're out of time. So we've been at an hour. We could probably do this for hours more, no doubt. But it would be fun to revisit this topic in the future and get some data scientists and folks working, hands-on in this space to talk about new and exciting things that are happening and how they're thinking about these problems and issues. So I don't think this will be the last time we have this conversation.
Yeah. Well, we should also find Sarah Connor.
Somebody go find her, please. And listen.
Put her into a safe place now.
Well, with that, we want to thank everybody for joining us for this episode. Look for us on your favorite podcast channels. The podcast goes out at the same time as the webcast on our YouTube and Facebook channels. Keep an eye on that. If you're not sure, go to communitycloudcast.com. And just look for the vNext series. You'll see it listed there, along with the link to the podcast. You can get it on all the major podcast platforms. And I think we're also doing video casting on those platforms, which I didn't know happened on some of these podcasts, but apparently it does. So we post the videos and they get distributed. And I only know that because when I posted one without video, the system squawked at me and said, "Why aren't you including a video?"
Oh, weird. Okay. Well,
so
sorry about
there you
that.
go. Many ways to consume our erudite and intelligent conversation, not to mention entertaining. So that's all for us this month, and we will see you all again next month.